This is like a topic of the time right now. Let's say someone who's listening is entirely new to this space, right? How do you think they should go about this? We ask this question to almost everyone from ML and AI.
Yeah.
So would want your playbook because everyone has their own playbook.
Exactly. Let's say they're just starting out fresh. It would take some time, like at least like few months to a year, to come to this point where they mastered ML, deep learning, and then switch to GenAI, understand how this LLM works, and then how do you call APIs, how do you prompt engineer, how do you evaluate. This whole process is going to take a time. What I would suggest is also build something apart from your learning, like two types of people, research to application deployment. So if you continuously keep on injecting a lot of material, and without doing anything, that's a mistake. Either if you are too hands-on and then not consuming fundamentals, that is a mistake too. So I would say start with the balance of both hands-on projects, especially the latest ones in the GenAI that everyone is interested in. So that will build your profile. And then eventually, since you're building, you'll also learn. But in your free time, also try to focus on the understanding the basics.
So, Nikhil, in the AI space, being an ML engineer, how do you see this field changing? So, traditional ML, where do you think it's going to go?
There'll be a lot of new roles coming up. Like there's a like completely new that might spin up in like this year or next year, and then it keeps on increasing. But to answer your question regarding the ML engineer's point of view for traditional way.
Our guest today is Nikhil Pentapalli, Senior Machine Learning Engineer at Adobe, who's building generative AI inside Acrobat. Yes, that PDF Acrobat. Nikhil specializes in document intelligence, computer vision, and large language models. We cover how is AI reshaping documents we see every day and why you should care, what makes PDFs so tricky for machines to understand, mistakes to avoid when breaking into GenAI, what is the future of ML engineering in the age of GenAI? Whether you're nerding out on AI, wondering what the difference between ML and AI is, or trying to break into GenAI, this one's for you. If you enjoy this content, subscribe to Data Neighbor in your favorite podcast app and YouTube. Let's dive into our conversation with Nikhil Pentapalli.
Welcome back, listeners, to Data Neighbors with Hi, Saravi and Sean. So today we have Nikhil with us. Nikhil's a senior machine learning engineer at Adobe, where he works on generative AI for Adobe Acrobat. Welcome to the show, Nikhil.
Hi, Shane. So excited.
Welcome, Nikhil. Welcome.
Sure.
Nikhil, so I'll start off. We'll get into your background, and we have a lot of stuff we want to discuss with you today. But just to kind of kick it off, you work on GenAI at Adobe, where tools like Acrobat are used by like millions of people in their daily workflows. And AI, as you know, is kind of this like the biggest buzzword in tech right now. Like I don't think you get a startup funded if you don't have AI in the company name. So every company is trying to add it. Sometimes it doesn't provide real value. So beyond like the hype, what's one way you think AI is already transforming how people interact with their day-to-day workflows, maybe as it pertains to documents?
Yeah, Sean. So I'll just give you a high-level understanding, like where it started and how we were able to, reach to this point where we are actually leveraging that the max potential of, AI in the documents. Initially, if you remember back in 2018, 2017, this whole good documents were messy, a lot of unstructured data, and then there's no way to digitize all these unstructured data, right? So that's when we had a lot of OCR tools, traditional ML based models, and then again, it's a very time consuming process to all digitize and automate all these things.
What are OCR tools?
So it's optical character recognition, where you try to take any PDF that's scanned and then try to convert it into a copyable or selectable text. Basically, you were able to extract the text out of the document.
Got it. Okay.
So we had like a bunch of open source tools back then, and then that didn't really work well. And then came like a lot of enterprise tools that started processing their own, having their own OCR, and then we saw a lot of developments in terms of contracts automation, documents automation, and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
We evolved in a way, and now we are here. We are leveraging vision models. We are leveraging a lot of advanced OCRs, and then we are leveraging a lot of LLMs just to process huge amounts of text daily. So across multiple domains, like not just finance or legal, but we are covering across all the domains, especially in terms of Acrobat. I would say because it's the only PDF reader, and Acrobat, the PDF itself is developed by Adobe, right?
Mhm.
So you know how good the Acrobat reader is in terms of all its features. And then I especially work on AI assistant in Acrobat, so it's like a GPT, chat GPT, but it has more advanced features.
So does it like summarize the document, or
Yeah,
or is it more
just
than that?
to give you an understanding, it's not just summarization. It has summarization plus it can answer questions for you on a large scale. It can actually answer questions from, let's say, if you have bunch of documents, it can answer questions on multi-doc. So basically, you can upload 10 docs at once and then ask any question, and then it can automatically understand which document use to retrieve the specific answer. And it doesn't just stop there. It also provides you the citations similar to, I think you might have seen in the Perplexity, right, where you can cite your sources, where it is coming from, and you can actually go back to the root source where exactly this answer is generating from, so that we are aware now that the answer is not hallucinated, right?
That's
This
really
is
cool.
awesome. So, Nikhil, so I'd like to take a step back, right? I'd like to want to understand. So, you are in Adobe, and like you said, Adobe is a place where documents, the Word docs that we used to have, probably paper printed docs that we used to have, became digital into Word documents and any of these text edit apps, right? And then Adobe came up with this PDF format, almost like an image, but not an image. I'd love to know about PDFs and their usage, and how do you think Adobe is thinking about AI in the space? What are some problems, like high level problems, that there are in the space of documents or PDFs per se? And then I love the way we are jumping into actually the details. We could definitely talk about the details, but maybe before that as well, I'd like to understand the space a bit.
Yeah, sure. That's a good question. So, I mean, let's start it from how exactly PDF is different from other documents,
Yes.
and then we can walk through from there.
Yes.
So, if you see, PDF is nothing but you are trying to impose a text layer on top of a blank page. Imagine it as layers on layer on top of the other layer. So, basically, if you are and then it can have like multiple formats. It can have images, it can have tables, it can have any sort of graphics embedded as a layer on top of it. So if you can extract the top layer perfectly without losing all these details, that's what is the proper OCR in a
Oh,
very layman
wow.
terms. But the difficulty is that there are two types of PDFs. First thing, so the first PDF they call like digital PDF, where you can do a Control F or Command F and then
Yes.
search on it.
Yep.
Right. And then you can get any search and the answer for that. Like just I want to search for this specific word, I can able to search that. If you just drag your mouse to select some text, you were able to select that text. But there is another PDF called scan PDF, which
Yep.
we know we just take a picture of it and then we send it. So you can't select the text on top of it because that is a complicated piece. You lose that part of selecting the text because now it has become an image. So if you directly embed that image inside a doc, it's still an image. So that's the way we see it. So that is the part where we have to do OCR to get to also convert that image into the text so that
So,
we can
as an
embed.
end user, I don't think, Sean, have you identified when you look at a PDF? No, it's a PDF out of a digital doc until we select. When we look at it, we would not know if it's an image that created the PDF or was it actual like Google Doc that you export into a PDF, right? Because it's not visible anywhere that says it's an image PDF or it's like a text PDF sort of a thing, right? It's up to Acrobat readers and the people who work on it to make sure that you take the context out of what was in that to make it more usable for the end user, I guess.
What I would say is that whatever you told is right. So we were in a space we want to. There are again like a lot of problems, not just with a scan doc, right? Even if you take scan document, we might just think it as a digital document. The real problem is scan documents are too bad. Let's say you can just have a tilted image. We can just take randomly using our phone, and we
Right.
don't know how it turns out. We can have an inverted image. We can have half cropped image that's not good. So how do you process these kinds of images? So this is one of the biggest challenges few years back because that used to obstruct a lot of workflow automations, especially in enterprises, in terms of finance, legal, or any sort of contract automations or stuff like that. Lots of industries are being blocked just because of this single problem. So that's where enterprise OCRs came in, and then it helped a lot. So
So
that is
interesting.
where I started my work in
Gotcha.
MLAI space.
So where does like Gen AI start coming into the picture? Just, it could be encoders as well. It doesn't just have to be like generative.
Yeah. So, where did GenAI come into picture into the PDFs? Again, think of it like now you have a PDF, and then we there Adobe released a feature called Liquid Mode 2 years back or last year, 2023, where if you want to look at the PDF on your iPad or your mobile or any device, irrespective of the device, it automatically structures those images to make sure it fits in your device properly. That uses AI in the background that makes sure we use our custom models to resize those images, resize the tables based on the based on the device that you are on. Let's say you're on iPhone 14, let's say you're on iPad, you are on some tab. So it depends on what sort of device you are on, and then it resizes the content based on that. So that's called liquid mode, and that's one of the feature for the Adobe Acrobat that you can use now.
That's actually, what that made me think. If you look at some websites, right, the web pages do such a bad job at rendering onto mobile surfaces, depending on the type of mobile you're on, right? It's below the fold. The most important CTA is below the fold because of how web pages are structured today, right? So that could be a problem for, to be honest, any type of format, not just a PDF format, like any like web page. I don't know if it's similar problems. I'm sure it's a entirely different building and structure around it. But I was just thinking of that's a problem for most of the things that work on desktop don't work on your mobile.
Yeah, it's the same way actually. I like your analogy. It's the same thing. Like you take the responsive pages, but it's the web pages. Now this is similar to that, but it'll be on the PDFs. You can call it like responsive PDFs. So that's the same analogy you can use. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Interesting. Sean, do you want to ask something? I was
Yeah, I think maybe even like getting back before like we get into the products, what led you to get into AI and also just like ML in the document space?
Yeah, so this started back when I was in bachelor's. Like what I was doing was I was just creating a SVM model or something, like SVM or a classification model, just to process some medical signals and then classify it as a simple binary classification. I was like, what is this unstructured data? I'm not even understanding what exactly this is. How does this even work? How do you actually set a threshold to convert to classify it as a 0 or 1? How does it even work? How do you train a model? All these are like blank spaces to me and a lot of gaps. So that is where I started learning more about data science and eventually learning about ML algorithms and a few other things. And then I got into a good company in India where we had like huge business problem of solving these documents and setting up some workflow automations back then. So yeah, that is where it started. I was doing some sort of training in terms of to extract these specific entities from the documents, and understanding the document structure, like how does the structure of the documents looks like, are the tables present in this document, what are the complex structures that are present in the document. Can we identify those? These are some of the areas I was able to focus back then, mostly like researching and reading a lot of papers on document AI when I was starting.
How do you maybe could you elaborate more in terms like what do you mean by structure? What's an example structure of a document? And then how do you leverage, ML AI to identify that structure at scale across lots of documents?
That's a good question. So basically, if you look at a document, we can start with like a title, header,
Yeah.
a main body, and then there'll be a footer. And in the body itself, you'll have a paragraph, you have sections, you have subsections, you have tables, you have tables tables inside a table, which is too complicated. And a lot of these are different kind of structures that can exist within just single page of a document. So we have to make sure we develop a model that is perfectly able to identify what is a section, what is a paragraph, what is a table. It should not misclassify, because eventually downstream we're going to process all these things, right? So we have
Yeah.
to make sure these are properly detected with good amount of accuracy, especially like we used object detection models back then to understand how the structure and how to identify each of these element in a specific page. So and then we're gonna send it for the processing, and then we get the results back. Either it can be extraction or it can just be understanding of the document.
Got it. What's like your kind of training data for that? So it's like people at your company are going through and labeling a bunch of documents of, hey, this is the title, this is a table, this is a table within the table. How do you basically
Yeah.
Evaluate
have
the
a
model.
metric? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
so we have two ways back then. We used to have an MLOps pipeline, that is for sure. I'll talk about that. But before that, the data part, we collected data from the open source. My whole team worked on it,
Okay.
me along with others, because the data set curation itself is going to take a lot of time in MLOps pipeline, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the data set was curated, and there was some sort of curation happen, and then that we got lot from open source. We collected a bunch of these data from the open source where we have data sets directly we can download, and then we also have like these internal data sets that have been annotated using some tools. And then once we have this labeling done, what we can do is we kind of club them, sample them together, and then made sure we have an evaluation set ready. So now when we train the model again, retrained on the whole data set, and then made sure we evaluated on this data set every time we train by optimizing few parameters in our training set like back then. So it was just a few object detection models and image segmentation models back then, if I remember. Yeah, but I don't think today we have those problems. We can easily identify using vision language models.
Yeah. Maybe
So
if you want to talk more about like, yeah, what that kind of evolution is
Yeah.
like to visual language models.
Yeah, with right now you can just send in a document page to GPT and GPT-4o, and it can understand it. It can just extract the whole text.
even if it's a scan, like if I go take a screenshot or
Yeah.
like of a textbook somewhere in the middle and send it, do you think it would do a good job?
Yeah,
I should try that actually.
it does a good job. It does a decent job, but definitely not something people will use in the enterprise scale, especially for the OCR, because you can't trust it, compared to however this general traditional OCR models have been evaluated against like a huge corpus of data. But due to this non-deterministic nature of LLMs, you can't never trust them.
That's what I was thinking. Like, imagine if I am taking a screenshot of this, textbook where it says authors Nikhil and someone maybe scratched it a little with their pencil, well, whatever. And it's is generative AI, all generative AI models take it and just think it could be Nikunj or whatever, right? Like any other name that it thinks might be more probability based on the textbook or whatever other information, right? So do you think it would like generate things in that case other than just giving facts of what it thinks there is?
Yeah, it might come up with some random name, one, or else let's imagine if you have provided 2, 3 more pages where there might be some sort of name like Nikhil.
Yes.
Then it might give you Nikhil
Pick it up.
itself,
Makes
because
sense.
it understands, okay, there's something scratched, and then there might be this person might be somewhere repeated based on the text context. So it is a multi-model, right? It not just uses the image, it also uses the text to understand, and then it combines both embedding. I don't want to go in depth, but it combines both, and then get some output that generates some sort of output. Yeah.
I think this is where there's going to be superpower in what you're talking about, like Gen AI and PDFs. Let's say I give my entire, I don't know, my bachelor's textbook of how computer networks work or whatever, right? And then it helps me understand this, I don't know, 2010s or 2000, like 10 years ago's textbook, and helps takes context from that and makes it relevant to current context with using LLMs, right? You use OCR stuff to understand what the book is about, what the scan product is about, and puts that in the context of today's world with the LLMs that that you use to like augment this data with. And then I'm going to have probably a better understanding of this textbook than in current time than just reading the textbook itself. Do you think that's true? Or is that how, maybe I'm just thinking of this use case in my head, but what other use cases are there? Like for a person when we use Gen AI in the document space?
Yeah, you can just throw in a textbook and then ask, summarize, and it doesn't do a good job because it just generically gives you a whole summary within a fixed context limit, right? Let's say around 2000, 3000 characters, not more than that. But if you prompt it well, like let's say I want summary per each chapter, and then don't miss out on any points in any chapter. Make sure all the key things, important things that are mentioned by author stays intact. I want to make sure, please make sure everything you have to spit out everything that is really important. Don't hallucinate. You have to prompt it like how you are teaching your children.
Oh my God.
And then
As you were telling it, Nikhil, I was thinking of the same thing. Like literally, it's like asking a kid, don't give me that, don't give me that, just give me this, sort of a thing.
yeah, and then prompt engineering is like a whole huge thing, which have been working on that for quite some time. And yeah, if you prompt it well, you can get a good summary of the notebook or a textbook that you want. And it's not just one use case, right? You can do if you want to do you can do question answering. If you want to ask it to help me prepare an examination paper out of this chapter or a question paper out of this chapter, it can do it. So you can use it for anything, but it's up to us. Like we have to be more creative, and then
That's
use
true.
it like a creative process. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
can
it's
think of all
interesting.
the open book exams that
Yes.
we had during masters. I'm like, oh, I don't think I know what to do now. I don't know what they're doing. We should probably get a college student, Sean, into our podcast to understand, guys, how are you leveraging AI when you're trying to give these exams or assignments?
Yeah, I was doing some work last week, late at night, and maybe it was the week before, and like ChatGPT went down, and I was like, "What the heck? Like, is it just my thing?" And then I go onto Twitter or X or whatever, and just like, are other people complaining about this? And it's like all college kids, and they're like, "I got an exam tomorrow. My paper's due in the morning. Come on, OpenAI. I'm gonna get an F." It's like, oh God, man, yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of
That's
glad it's kind of
amazing.
weird. I don't know. I feel like now I have the kind of discipline and want where I use LLMs to help actually learn things and learn what I'm doing. And I don't just like take their answers, but I do definitely leverage them to do a bunch of the annoying stuff I don't like to do before. But when I was in college, I don't think I'd have this self-discipline. I'd think I'd be like, write the paper for me, turn it
Oh
in.
my
All
God.
right, I'm gonna have a beer now.
So true. I was asking my cousins this, like when they were over for Christmas, and
Yeah.
we had like a house party and a dinner, and so these kids, they were in their bachelor's, like second year, first year, and they were talking about they share one, ChatGPT account, and like all they do is use ChatGPT to come up with this assignment that's for like a course that they don't care much about. I'm
Yeah.
like, well, what are you learning? And then he says, I don't care about that course. I'm just doing it for credits. And that's where I use ChatGPT more. And I'm like, okay, I know there are AI detector software and all of that. Like, but still, these kids are, getting away with it.
Getting creative, I guess.
Yeah.
That's true, actually.
I want to go back to kind of we're talking about evaluation a little bit. So historically, before you're using these more ML and LP techniques to identify the structure of a document, probably pull out different entities from a document, maybe even do some sort of summarization. At least with the structure and kind of entities, it sounds like you had curated data sets and open source data sets that you could test against. Now it seems like rather than building the model, maybe it's more around like evaluating your prompts and you're going through like a prompt engineering. What does that kind of evaluation workflow look like now?
There are two things, like what are we trying to evaluate? First thing, are we trying to evaluate the summarization task? Are we trying to evaluate entity extraction task? Are we trying to evaluate a question answering task? So
Yeah.
whatever we're trying to evaluate is very dependent on our task that we are doing. And then are we using any traditional ML models? And we know how that pipeline works. We used to have a test data set, and then we have maybe a human in the loop element, and then we have an auto evaluation systems. Basically, we can do a combination of both human in the loop and then the auto evaluation part. That
Yeah.
was traditionally how ML systems used to be get evaluated on. But how these LLMs are little different is that It's going to be a similar approach. Again, we have to, if we are working on a specific use case, then we craft a data set for that specific use case. But let's say at Adobe or any big company which deals with like lot of diverse a set of PDFs from all the documents, we have a diverse collection which we have to evaluate against, right? So it might be like, again, finance, legal, banking, it can be all the sectors.
Yeah.
So one thing we generally do or big companies do is also have human in the loop and then human experts or subject matter experts to craft this data set for them, along with, having auto evaluation and flywheel systems in place. So just a little bit context on flywheel is it's like a system where you keep in your production so that whatever you are generating as an output, you can automatically evaluate and then show these metrics and then collect some feedback from the users, real users, and then keep updating, your models, retrain them if we are using ML models, or optimize your prompts if you are using LLM based APIs or models. So that's like an iterative process. I think within an year we can see a lot of huge improvements, not just in my company, in any company. If you work and collect feedback from real users, that's definitely going to improve this product metrics and analytics metrics.
Almost like bandits, right? And ChatGPT keeps asking you, do you like it? Do you not like it? Do you really love it? I do less of that, but probably that's going to help ChatGPT understand what type of an output it likes you. And sometimes when you go back and forth, it gives you two responses. What do you like? Choose one, sort of a thing. And that helps probably cater towards more personalized content, especially more creative stuff, something that you wanted to write like you. I've seen giving feedback to it on what type I like has helped me so much in getting the content that I wanted to generate.
Yeah, LLMs also deal with like a lot of memory, right? It also captures that memory, it stores that memory, and there are different types of memories. If you want to talk, we can talk about that, like episodic memory, semantic memory, procedural memory, and how these agents work using this memory. And then that's how you can see your next responses like look better than, when you dislike something in ChatGPT, it might ask you why or something, or it might just in the back end it processes, and next time when you ask the same question like 1 or 2 days later or something, it might come up with a different response. Now because it's stored that this response is not accurate or not what user expected, so they want something new. So even that is going to happen in the back end because there will be a changes in the memory specific to you user.
Can you elaborate a little in layman terms the three memories that you pointed out?
Yeah, so episodic memory, procedural memory, and then semantic memory. Semantic memory is just like how humans consume facts, right? With some examples like, okay, this is something fact. So it's a fact now. ChatGPT doesn't, let's say ChatGPT is a baby, it doesn't have any memory initially. So you are not just ChatGPT, it can be any LLM that has, think of it like an external memory that is connected, just like our brain. Chat GPT or any GPT or LLM is just your central processing unit, and then you have your brain. How can you our brain has these three types of memories, right? You have semantic for facts, episodic is for, okay, at that time in San Francisco in 2001 this happened, this situation happened, that is your episodic memory. So that is another type of memory. And then you have I just forgot the third one.
Wait, so semantic, episodic, I think that's what you started with. Procedural?
Procedural. So procedural talks more about like if you explain some sort of flow right to it.
Makes
So
sense,
it
yes.
takes care like, okay, this is the flow. You have to follow it next time. So whenever you ask a question next time, it kind of follows that specific procedure. So for example, let's say if you go to ChatGPT and then you can just say, whenever I ask you a question about Python, explain me some sort of code in Python. So it generally comes up with one structure, right? Now, if you say that always use this format and remember this format, do you know what it does internally?
Goes
I
and
always
saves it.
assumed that it just like tagged it onto the prompt later on or something, but no, I don't know how.
And then it stores in the memory.
Okay.
It has its memory. You can go to settings and then you can actually go to your memory. There's an option called memory in ChatGPT.
Oh, I never checked that out. Oh my
You
God.
should see. It knows everything about you,
Oh.
people like me, you, everyone.
I'm sure it knows, but I'm now like so curious to go and look at what type of attributes that it thinks that that it, saved for me, right?
Yeah.
Because I never told it specifically, remember this specific thing, but I'm sure it grabbed a lot of information about who I am already.
It
Yeah,
will grab.
you can
You
go
can just
through.
ask it like, tell me about like myself, and then it comes with whole bunch of what it's
Yes.
stored, and then you can go and delete this. You can add your new memories to it as you go on, move on in next 1-2 months, and then you can ask any new questions on that memory as well. It will take that also into consideration while answering your
And you
question.
can delete stuff
You can
too. Yeah. It's like a
Almost
line
like
by
cookies.
line. Yeah, it's like a line by line. It'll have the little descriptions of memories. I went in there actually like a month ago because I hit my like memory max or something. And I was like, what the hell? I paid $20 a month for this thing. They're probably trying to like get
Pay
me to go to 200. I know.
Sean, pay
I feel like
200.
they're throttling it lately, man. They're definitely trying to like,
Yes.
oh, you want more? Pay more money. It's like, dude, I'm
Yes.
just gonna go to a different company. But I do think that's cool that you can adjust your memory.
Yeah, the customization and user persona is one thing like every enterprise is currently working on, because that will get you answers that are crafted specifically for a user. Like if he's a banker, they get an answer specific to them. If it's a salesperson, they get an answer crafted to their domain
Yeah.
and then to them basically.
How does do you happen to know, and it's okay if you don't, how it leverages that memory though? Like say I ask a prompt right now, is it effectively going into all this text that I have in its memory and appending that to my prompt, or is it something else with how it works?
Yes, sure. So the system prompt, which is the default, will always be same. What happens is that all these memories that we have will be stored as vectors in the vector database. Apart from whatever context you provide, you can, let's say, upload few documents or images, or just type in some text and say, based on this text and based on that memory, it'll club both, not just concatenate directly, but based on your question, what did you ask for? Then it looks up and then see in the vector database of your memory, is it able to find something similar that it can pull from there? And then it'll pull that. Then it'll also generate some context, right? It'll append to that, and then it rewrites the whole thing to generate the final output.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And I sometimes don't want it to do that. I have faced this like at work when we have this enterprise account, I don't use it as for every single document of mine, right? I use it for some documents. It remembers the document from a month ago, and I asked it a generic question to help me with this, and then it just gives me the context of this old doc that's not relevant anymore, and it puts that in. I'm like, please just do what I asked you to do. Don't give me this. Don't put the memory that I didn't ask for, trying to be smart, thinking to impress me, but no, you didn't impress me. So please stop getting the context from other places that we already chatted. Just answer the specific things. I had to prompt it a bit for it to stick to what I gave as a prompt and not add new things.
That happened to me preparing for this podcast interview with you, Nikhil, where I was like curating some questions for you. And then all of a sudden it started bringing in all these questions around like trust and safety, which is a past podcast that we recorded. And I was like, no, like,
Wow.
wrong person, man. Never do that again.
It has the memory. Yeah.
Actually, something interesting. I was listening to a podcast with an AI researcher from Anthropic, and she's like kind of the person who's talked to Claude like the most out of anyone. And I actually don't use like Claude as much, but I want to use it more. But for ChatGPT, I use these same kind of things that she recommended, where like I will say stuff like "never again." Do that, like very kind of like intense declarations. And then the other thing she had recommended was like you were talking about like, hey, maybe the LLM will ask you why it's wrong, or you'll tell us why it's wrong. Actually asking it why it's wrong. It'll give me a response and I'll just write, why was that response incorrect or bad? And then it'll evaluate its own response. And then I'll be like, great, write a new prompt with like what you learned. Then I feel like it's looking into itself and figuring out what the actual problem was and trying to recurate to solve for that, rather than me having to guess as a human.
Sean, that feels like therapy to me. It's like therapy. Yeah. It's like going and you sit and look into yourself.
How does that make you feel?
Yes,
that you
exactly.
That's no, you're a terrible LLM. How does it make you feel? Why are you so bad at your job? No, I'm just kidding. For all the AIs listening, you guys are great. When you take over, like I love you guys. Like He's gonna be nice to
Yeah,
them.
exactly.
I'll cut out
Bard's
the
looking
stuff.
at us. Bard's looking, or Gemini currently is looking at us to make sure Data Neighbor podcast shows up in people's searches. So please do a good job, Gemini.
Do a ranking it on the top.
Oh yeah, I was
Yeah.
talking about ChatGPT. Bard, you're great. Yeah, Gemini, you're awesome.
Yes, exactly. So, Nikhil, these are wonderful. I mean, like great discussions, right? This is like a topic of the time right now. So, how do you think, let's say someone who's listening is entirely new to this space, right? How do you think they should go about this? We ask this question to almost everyone from ML and AI space.
Yeah.
So, would want your playbook because everyone has their own playbook.
Exactly.
What do you think would be your playbook?
Yeah. So again, like you can take it in different ways. So depends on like individual too. But if we consider someone just starting or just trying to switch into AI with some experience, or let's say zero experience, let's talk about one with zero experience. Let's say they're just starting out fresh, right? If they want to start it from the scratch, from the beginning, from the basics in a theoretical way, it would take some time, like at least like few months to an year, to come to this point where they mastered ML, deep learning, and then switch to GenAI, understand how this LLM works, and then call how do you call APIs, how do you prompt engineer, how do you evaluate. This whole process is going to take a lot of time, and that by the time they finish this, there'll be a lot of huge things added in the backlog to learn new things.
Yeah.
A new deep seek.
Yeah, it's like even I can't keep up to date myself reading like lots of research papers weekly, but still it's like there are a bunch of research papers still needs to be read. So we can't just force anyone to have a specific roadmap. So everyone has their own pace. But what I would suggest is like also build something apart from your learning, because building is a different, theoretical learning is different. You build something that will improve your profile overall, and it also lets you learn, right? Although you did not understand the internals of how it works, you're still building something, you're still making something valuable out there. You can build agents without knowing how you can actually code an attention mechanism. It has nothing to do with what you need to understand is how do you plan on making these agents, how do you think like a human, how can you be creative, how can you connect these multi agents, how can you manage your memory, how can you evaluate these agents. So this is something everyone has to know if they're building something. Again, like two types of people: research to application deployment. So if you continuously keep on injecting a lot of material, and without doing anything, that's a mistake. Either if you two are too hands on and then not consuming fundamentals, that is a mistake too. So I would say start with balance of both, hands-on projects, especially the latest ones in the Gen AI that everyone is interested in. So that will build your profile. And then eventually, since you're building, you'll also learn. Go back and learn the basics. But in your free time, also try to focus on the understanding the basics. Take more courses that are in depth, not just these YouTube courses. They say like master RAG in like 5 hours. It's impossible. It's impossible to
Really?
master
I was
RAG
going
in
to go
5 hours.
master RAG with that, Nikhil. So I think deep learning.ai is good, right?
Yeah,
Jokes apart.
learning that AI is good. I mean, RAG is again like a huge topic. I've read almost each and every paper last year in the RAG space. So I'm also giving a talk with Aureli next on March 4th regarding the RAG in production challenges and then how to overcome those challenges.
Oh, nice. Is that like in-person talk, or is that going to be
Virtual
hosted?
super
Cool.
stream. It's an AI super stream, and then yeah, it's gonna be pretty nice.
Oh, that's
I'm looking forward to that.
nice. We should, I mean, if there's a link or some registration available, you should send us so that, we'll put it under this
Sure,
YouTube video.
I'll do that.
Yeah.
So we will talk about all these challenges based on my one whole year experience working on that RAG alone. So there's a lot to understand in depth. So again, like if someone is learning, there's a breadth and there is a depth, right? So go into a sweet spot like in between breadth and depth, so that you can actually show to people that you have built, and you also have a knowledge of theoretical knowledge, like how it works inside, like internally, how do you do this RAG if you are just talking about RAG context, or if you are talking about agents. So I would say that would be the best way, because too much theory is again just sticking into theory, not building anything, doesn't improve your profile, doesn't let you put yourself out there, right? That's the problem. If you build
Also,
something, you can show. Yeah.
no, absolutely. I think this is something that came up in Aishwarya Reganti's podcast as well. Guys, check it out. We'll have a link that we attached. But she also spoke about the same thing about how making sure you build, you learn, and you build, and making sure you put it to practical use, all the knowledge you've learned. Instead, it'll just go into your LLM in your brain. It's will super hard for you to, extract information unless you put it out somewhere. So, but Nikhil, this reminds me of what you're doing in this space, in the AI space, being an ML engineer. Like you were hired as an ML engineer, right, into Adobe.
Yes.
And how do you see this field changing? So, do you think the traditional ML, where do you think it's going to go? If there are people, I had someone that I was talking to the other day, Shan and Nikhil, that she was interested. She took a break for parenting. She's a computer science grad. She worked as a software developer, and now she's coming back to work. And she was like, "Hey, Shravya, I'm trying to understand, do I go back to my older place or do I just take another year, learn about all this, and jump into the AI bandwagon?" And people are still trying to understand, does the traditional job stay the same? Will there be enough, I don't know, inventory of the type of jobs? I spoke about software engineering, but I'd love to know from your perspective about machine learning engineer without Gen AI, and maybe an AI engineer or a Gen AI engineer or whatever, the new titles that are showing up.
Yeah.
I'd like to know from your perspective, how is the job market for
Yeah.
these fields or these
Sure.
titles?
There'll be a lot of new roles coming it up. Like we have, which we never might listen about them. Those are like completely new that might spin up in like this year or next year as well. And then it keeps on increasing. Some new names might come up. We heard prompt engineer. We might hear some sort of optimization engineer, something else that can be anything.
Agentic
Agent
engineer.
engineer, build.
Yes.
Yeah, agent engineer, agentic deployment engineer. It can be anything, like any new
Yeah.
role that might come up. But to answer your question regarding the ML engineer's point of view for traditional way, the traditional models are there in few places. We don't want to, because LLMs are right now expensive, but they are the rate at which the cost is decreasing is like huge. If you compare to 2 years back, the cost of LLMs are way down now, like around 100x down, 100 to 200x down, compared to last 2 3
Wow.
years. So, and people have come to a place like for all the simple tasks, they are just trying to introduce LLM calls instead of having their own models, simple models, traditional
Like I
models.
used to write a proper, paragraph before. Now I'm like, ChatGPT, help me here. So darn easy to do that. And then I realize, oh my God, so much, I don't know, server power is going into it. Am I being not green? This is something like entirely different problem that comes up with probably Gen AI and stuff. But yeah. Sorry to break your flow there.
Okay, that's fine. I'll continue on that. So, for example, let's take an entity extraction system that traditionally, like couple of years back, 4 5 years back, we used to train a model or a spacey or NLTK, or just these are some of the packages that we use to extract these entities like names, addresses, stuff like that. So we used to have these models, and then we used to train custom entities to extract these models. That was like a huge time taking process back then. Now, if you just upload a PDF and then give a JSON format or an Excel saying that, okay, this is the input field, this is the description of that field, it just gets all the fields for you. So you don't need to do anything right now.
Wow.
So there's a shift happened, right? Like basically from that maintaining that traditional models to LLM. So this is like a replaceable thing for sure, but it eventually slowly happens. It doesn't happen like overnight or just within 2 3 months. It's going to slowly transition. Everything's going to everyone is switching to LLMs. Even the normal traditional ML models for all these time series or data analytics models, or just the classification model, regression models, or these are slowly switching towards LLMs. So that's where I'm seeing like what would happen. I'm not sure it would completely be replaced, because comparative to these old legacy systems, some enterprises are very slow to move.
Absolutely.
When I think kind of practically about, maybe tell me about like the work you're doing as a ML engineer. How much of the time now, if you're not basically, say like text classification, if you're not, building this classification model, instead you're like hitting the API of one of these big LLM companies, and you're doing more prompt engineering, and you're doing, sounds like some like probably some engineering and like what's in memory. A lot of that's more like text-based kind of telling the computer what to do. Of course, there's also like the evaluation piece we can talk about in a bit. And so in addition to kind of like that, like prompt engineering kind of work, is there other type of like tuning work that people are doing, like not at the LLM companies, but at kind of like in industry companies to say like fine tune this model to this specific type of data set, or or like do I build, I don't know, do I like fork the whatever the R1 model and like build my own version of that off this other data?
For sure. I think like we don't need to use powerful LLMs like GPT-4 or 4o mini for simple tasks like classification or simple predictions, right? We can use a simple bird, take your pre-trained transformer models like bird or something
Right.
like that. Then you can make a distilled version of it. You can fine tune it for your specific use case. You can do either of things rapidly, like that'll have a lot of impact on the costs, because
Yeah.
GPT-4o for 100 requests it's fine. Let's say you're making like millions and millions of requests. If you're working for a big tech or something, it's going to scale, like the costs are going to scale like crazy. Like you can't control those costs. So that is when these distilled models or fine-tuned models, specifically, they are like you can deploy them, or you can just deploy them locally, or you can deploy them on the cloud as well. The idea here is that the size of these models are small, and then even that processing power is enough to, for example, if you're building the classifier, it's enough for you to get a good result.
Right.
Compared to the GPT-4. I mean, you don't need to use powerful models there. And then you can have an SLM, small language models, that are trained specifically to your tasks, that only knows how to answer to that specific task. So these are some of the optimizations I think, yeah, one should do. One should understand like what is the end goal now. This is our input. This should be our output. What is the business expectation is, and based on that, we have to take these right choices of selecting what model suits best, and we can go from there.
Yeah, maybe to provide like an example too, even like within a document, there's different, I'm sure, types of work you're doing, whether it's identifying the structure or entity extraction or summarization, or this kind of like AI assistant chat. What type of work do you think lends itself to an LLM will really have a lot of gain here and is worth the money versus, these are tasks that like an encoder like Distillbird or something, we can just leverage that and we don't have to be spending all this money on an LLM to do a job that something simpler could do.
Yeah, for sure. For example, identifying your structure in the document, you don't need LLM to do that, because traditionally we've been already doing that. We have been doing a good job, so we can just stick to that. For example, classifiers is another thing. Like we can have like a bunch of document classifiers or entity type of classifiers. Even if we are routing a specific question, like based on the complexity of the question, we can route it to a specific LLM, right? Let's say if just there is a simple question, what is your name or something, we don't need a powerful LLM to answer that question. So we also route it based on the complexity of the question. So these are like multiple places that you can stick to, either normal traditional models, versus where you use LLMs is places like you want to do an answer generation, or you want to do summarization, right? Where you need to predict our next token, but generative models, but then at scale, like we have to take in whole context of that document, or whole context of the text that you typed in, or the image. So that is when LLMs, with like powerful LLMs, will help. For example, as we mentioned, like for documents, we can use a RAG based approach to chat with the documents, but if you just try to use it directly with the chat GPT, it doesn't work fine. So we have to take the RAG route, and then that is when you get a proper answer that is much grounded to your document and then the question as well.
So before we move into evaluations and, slightly in detail there, I know that you have a speaking engagement coming up with O'Reilly, right, about RAG. Do you want to give us a trailer of what that is about? Maybe give us like what according to you is RAG, and what will you be speaking about? How do you summarize your work in the last 1 year in 5 minutes, which is the hardest thing to do, I guess.
Okay, 5 minutes is tough, but I'll try to
forget about the 5 minutes. Just
No,
try
you
to talk
go
about
on.
it.
So, because there's been like a lot of progress in last 1 year on the RAG, people have tried multiple things, tried multiple papers, tried multiple techniques at each part, each phase of the RAG. Like let's say data ingestion is a phase.
Can you please talk about RAG first? Like, what is RAG? maybe simpler terms. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out, Shravya. So RAG is retrieval augmented generation. And why do we do that? Why was it needed in the first place compared to just using traditional LLMs? Is a fact that like you can just upload a PDF in the chat GPT and then ask a question. And it just generally give you an answer, generalized answer, right? So it's not like specific to your question exactly to the point. So that is where RAG comes into picture. It uses retrieval under the hood and then uses that retrieved context from that specific document and then appends it with and then uses it as a context for LLM to generate your answer. So that way, now when you ask a question, let's say when did this person born? For example, when did the person X born? So it'll look up in the document and then identify a place where exactly this is coming from, and then it will pass that relevant piece of text to LLM as a context so that now it doesn't need to search whole document, but it just searches that space to get the relevant answer so that your answer relevancy is more, you are on to the point, and that is where RAG comes into picture. Yeah.
And it helps it hallucinate less because there is actually a place that it is getting the information from, not just, coming up with something without any specific information, right?
Yeah, that's the right way to put it. So less hallucination, more groundedness to the answer is one way. Yeah. For sure. And then RAG is just not very new. It has been there from 2020. It's just a retrieval. And then LLMs became so popular that we are just adding that retrieval to our LLMs so to generate answer better. So that if you see it like a retrieval problem, it was there from long time.
And also, it almost feels like an augmented prompt, right? You have a prompt, and then what else could be added to the prompt from all the information that you have that can help LLM give you the most accurate or contextual answer for that question.
Exactly. Yeah. So breaking that document into small chunks and then, that helps you get a better answer. That's the whole idea of RAG system along with, augmentation and generation. And then again, coming back to what this talk covers exactly is that there are multiple phases, while developing this production grade architecture for RAG. So, what are the real world challenges? What have people tried? What worked and what didn't work? So, why won't it work? And then, what are the best practices you have to follow at each stage to overcome those bottlenecks? So, this is something we are trying to cover on this topic. So, there are different phases like data ingestion and then processing and then generation and then evaluation. How do you handle and how do you take care of best practices at all these stages is something that would be covered in depth.
Anything like you want to talk about, like briefly among these, like data ingestion? I think you pointed out that dividing the doc into readable sections, it could be data ingestion piece, right?
Yeah, I mean, people just build a lot of projects. For example, like a student who just graduated, if they want to build, they just build a project like chat with their documents just by take some PDFs, chunk them, use some sort of chunker, and then chunk them into small pieces, put them in some sort of vector database. And then this is the ingestion part, right? They just do it
Yes.
naively. Like they just use like, okay, I use a naive chunker. I don't know my configuration settings. I don't know how to which documents needs which sort of chunking techniques. And then what are your good chunking techniques that are available? What works and then what doesn't work is something we're covering in that. I mean, like there are again pieces like where you have to do some parameter tuning for chunks as well, because it completely depends on your data set as well. So that piece. And then how do you handle ingestion at scale? Let's say you're not building a personal hobby project, but you're building for an enterprise that deals with like billions and billions of documents. How are you going to index all these documents? So you have to make sure you parallelize all these systems to make sure you process all these documents and then chunk them parallelly and then store them. So user need not wait, when they upload a
Yes.
document and type a question, they should not wait, for more time to
Data
get an
ingestion
answer.
that happens in the background, sequentially, you'd rather have that.
Parallelize that and then improve your latency overall, like end-to-end latency. What are the best practices is something I'm covering there. If you want to talk more about data ingestion at scale, I would say, how do you parse better? Like what sort of OCR techniques? Again, how do you leverage asynchronous systems? What are the bottlenecks that one can have in enterprise is something, yeah, I'm covering there for the data.
And I think at the end you spoke about evaluation, and that's what I remember Sean and I want to definitely cover with you. So probably we could talk about that a bit.
Sure.
Yeah. I think actually one of the questions I have there is, we talked about, these different types of ways to leverage LLMs in a document. Some of these could lend itself to just more traditional methods like entity extraction and classification. And I imagine when you're evaluating that, like you kind of already walked through that evaluation process of you have like a human in a loop, or you have this curated data set, and you can effectively just like, measure like precision or recall and accuracy on that kind of stuff. Now, what I'm curious about is, say, these other things that you're like, okay, LLM really performs a lot better here, like summarization or kind of the Q&A, or probably other things too. I would love your opinion on how do you evaluate that kind of thing when whether it's like, oh, we're going to use a different model, like we're going to use Claude instead of ChatGPT, or we're going to try RAG, or we're going to like do some prompt engineering. How do you evaluate that?
Yeah, so evaluation is a huge piece altogether that's
I know.
blank for a lot of enterprises out there. But I'm gonna go on a very high level, but let me know if you want to go in depth on any specific topic. So let's start with, if you're making your own RAG pipeline, right? For just an answer generation, let's talk about answer generation for now, and then we can scope it out. So if you're talking about answer generation and RAG, there might be a lot of metrics specifically at the retrieval stage and then your generation stage. And then after you generating the answer, how do you evaluate the quality of an answer? These are different metrics that are there. And there are a bunch of frameworks that are open source that we can refer to these metrics, which are directly available out of the box. But not these metrics are not enough, are not sufficient, because they cater to some extent, but they don't cater to all the audience and all the sectors or all the domains. So that is where we had to develop our own suite of metrics. So how do we have our answer quality? How do you measure our answer quality?
Right.
Do we just use LLMs, or will we just use humans, or will you combine them both? Is something I can talk a little about. So generally how it works is, apart from the open source retrieval metrics, we also crafted few more retrieval metrics that are proprietary, and then and then generation metrics. Let's think of it like,
Yeah. What is open source retrieval metrics? What do you mean by a metric here? Like probably just couple of lines of what you mean by that.
so metric, again, like what are you trying to evaluate? Like let's say there is an input and then there's an output. How good is your output, or how good did it generate, if it's generating something? Or how let's say if you are taking a traditional classification system, right? Is it predicting the same output as expected, or is it predicting something different? So how do you evaluate that? We have precision recall metrics. In that way, even in the LLMs space, or even with the RAG, we do have some specific metrics. For example, retrieval metrics that translates to how good the retrieval is happening, right? For example, I was retrieving 10 chunks. Does it mean like all the 10 chunks are properly retrieved, or do you think they're ranked properly? Are they in the order? Or is it just retrieving, or is it just retrieving in a wrong order? So all these are different types of metrics. For example, the context similarity, contextual relevancy, ground, and then for the generation we have groundedness, faithfulness, and then these are like basic metrics. So that'll let you know, like these are not LLM based metrics. These are metrics based on the similarity. Like, what is your question? What is your answer? Is your question vector embeddings is similar to your answer? Like embeddings, you are comparing embeddings. You are checking the similarity of your question and your answer. We're not even LLMs.
Makes sense. Oh my God.
So these are like similarity based metrics, embedding based metrics. And then now talking about answer quality, we do have LLM based metrics that are completely like prompt based metrics. You design your own prompts and your own LLM prompts. You can have a combination of LLMs. For example, you can have a bunch of LLMs, like say Claude, and two models from OpenAI, one model from Claude, one model from any other provider. You can have your open source models, and then everything will have its own prompts. And then you can make your LLM as a judge kind of thing that gives you one specific score. And you should not rely on just one metric. You should take like bunch of metrics for just if you want to evaluate your answer quality.
So are you saying when you do LLM as a judge, you use multiple different LLMs as separate judges,
Yes.
your judging panel.
Yeah, it's like a jury basically.
Yeah.
That
Oh, that's interesting.
does it. Yeah, because you can't just trust one person. Just
So,
like
do you know how they go about? They have their own metrics, I'm sure. Can we tune them as well? Like, how does an LLM judge another output?
so.
Yeah, maybe an example.
Yeah, maybe example. Yeah, if you probably talk about it.
Yeah, so let's say we asked a question and it generated an answer, and then let's say OpenAI can have more scores. If you can score it on a specific scale like 1 to 5, you can
Yes.
prompt it in a way that you have to tell what is 1, what is 2,
Exactly.
what is 3, what is
Yeah.
4, what is 5, because that has a meaning to it. So classify something as between 1 to 2 or 1 if it follows the specific rules.
Yes.
And then if it's not following, classify it as 3 and 4, something like that.
Yep.
We should have our own set of instructions properly defined so that we can have a good number on the Likert scale, because GPTs are very bad with numbers. So if you
Exactly.
just ask it to rank
Right.
it from 1 to 100, just gets, sometimes it might rank it 1, sometimes it might rank it like somewhere in 50, 60 or something. So it's very non-deterministic in nature. So prompt again will really help here. So more grounded prompts, more well-defined, well-crafted prompts will make the evaluation also easier. So two parts again to this evaluation, right? You can have some sort of numerical representation like objective metrics, and then you can do some sort of subjective evaluation. How can we because LLMs are subjective. Like,
Yeah.
you think
Yeah.
one about LLM and then I can think another, have another opinion on LLM. LLM itself has its own opinion on its own
Oh my God, that's
different
hilarious.
theory. Yeah. So that's the reason we bring in like human in the loop element, because we have to also take their feedback, put it in, use their feedback to optimize our prompts.
So, who is this human in the loop? Is this an ML engineer? Is this a subject matter expert? Is this a PM? Like, what have you seen in the past?
Yeah. So it would be because as an AI engineers, ML engineers, we don't have a specific
Context,
knowledge of
right?
what
Yes.
banking people have, what legal people
Yep.
have. So we have technical expertise. If they can communicate to us, okay, this is how we think, and this is how LLM should think, we can integrate that. But we need their thought processes. How do they think, basically? Like if you are very new to this, and how would you think? If they can provide their thought processes, we can inject that into our prompt.
So, subject matter expert is what you're saying, right? Whatever you're building the LLM for, there needs to be someone who would have probably done it the non-LLM way, would know what's right, what's wrong, which ideally is the subject matter expert in that area.
So it's similar to like crafting your like, let's say I give you a document, I give you a question, take a look at it, take a look at document, understand that what is in the document, and then give in your own terms how will you answer this question.
Yeah,
So then we compare that answer to what's generated in using LLM and see how much difference there is in terms of meaning. Then what is missing? We take that missing piece. We kind of generalize how can we optimize our prompt to fill in that gap, basically. So that's how we prompt tune iteratively to bring this evaluation metrics like really good.
Wow.
When you're looking at what's missing, are you doing that on like a small sample of the data where you're getting the human feedback, or are you doing it on like, is there a more automated way of doing that with like all the data that like your LLM as a judge is also providing some feedback?
Apart from that human in the loop, I also mentioned the auto eval systems should also be in place for every enterprise, because human in the loop is one part, but then the flywheel or the auto evaluation part is a different thing, right? Because you need to have that place where you collect real feedback from the users as well, right? So that is something, it has to be in the place. So these auto eval metrics are computed on the fly. When they ask a question, let's say we have a list of 10 metrics or 15 metrics or 20 metrics, all these 20 metrics are computed and they are stored in our own database or something, wherever these metrics are stored. Later, we can just look at these metrics. We don't store the user data, we just store their metrics in a redacted way so that we know which data corresponds to what exactly.
Gotcha.
Wow.
One more question. So just to summarize a little bit, so how do we evaluate one of these LLMs that's doing like a Q&A sort of situation while we have an LLM as a judge that basically has some opinion of whether it meets certain criteria based on the prompt and the answer. You also have humans in the loop that effectively do the same thing. That's how you evaluate the answer to your question. Now, in terms of like how do you evaluate your LLM as a judge, are you then basically saying like, hey, are the LLM as a judge, how close are they to the answers that the human in the loop are making? Are the human in the loop also evaluating the LLM as a judge and saying like, oh no, it got these ones wrong? Or what does that process look like for
Yeah,
this like second order?
generally, yeah, I get your questions. So basically, we do have some sort of scales, right? Like there has to be a scale. Like this is the starting, this is the
Yep.
ending point. So like think of it like just as a Likert scale, like 0 to 10 or 0 to 5. And then based on what LLM generates and then what human generates, we identify the gap. Like a human just said it's 2 out of 5. Then LLM said it's 3 out of 5 for a specific metric. Let's say answer quality, a specific answer quality metric A. So how do you fill the gap? Because now LLM said it's 3, and then subject matter expert said it's 2. Because
Mhm.
we trust subject matter expert more than LLM, there's definitely something wrong. Either LLM is hallucinating or there is something wrong. So then we identify those cases and work on those cases, especially. Then we try to optimize our prompts. So that's the reason is that like there are again two elements, right? Human in the loop as well as the auto evaluation. So we have these things both tied in a box. So both go, yeah, hand in hand.
Awesome. We are close to end of the podcast, Nikhil. So maybe one last question, and maybe Sean, if you have another last question, you can add after this.
Mhm.
Nikhil, where do you see us going? Very hard or question or very easy
No,
question,
I'm
depending on
pretty
how.
clear where we're going in the next year and then this year.
This year, come on, we don't want to know this year. We want to know maybe next 3 years, next 5 years, or 10 years. Where do you think, Nikhil, we are going towards LLMs? I think we discussed a little bit, right? Like the type of roles we are going to see is going to be entirely different. That's one very interesting aspect. The other aspect could be like how do we probably will see AI getting integrated into different business systems, and maybe a point here for people who are non-tech, right? For people who are probably PMs or like people who are non-data folks who are trying to listen to this, understand like what could they see themselves doing that would make them still be part of AI and not get worried about their jobs being taken by AI.
Whatever is require creative processes and then is not like a stagnant like same work they're doing, like repetitive work they're doing daily, that those jobs, like the repetitive work jobs, are like kind of risky. But if they need to think creatively, do something new every day, come up with their own challenges, solve their own things, right? That is those jobs are going to stay. Nothing's going to happen for them. The only part that's going to happen is, you know, about this Jevons paradox, where we as we can see, the growth is going to actually exponentially increase. Like even with increasing with LLM usage and all, the number of AI engineers will go up. The jobs
Yeah.
won't go down. What jobs will go down is the number of job, like the productivity, where there are like lot of repetitive tasks happens. Like those jobs are kind of in risk. So it's always better to upskill everyone in those areas into AI so that they also have this idea. And then where we are going in the future, it's a very, I mean, there's a lot of ways we can go, but this year is completely about like agents. Now we are at a stage where we can interact with lot of other tools. LLM being at the center, we can interact with lot of web search tool, Python tools, code engine tools, research tools, and then we can build a lot of agents out there. And then browser use, you just give an input in a natural language and it goes out there and books a flight ticket for you, right? So we are already there. There are startups that are coming doing all these things already. So what's next is like completely autonomous, making the whole flow autonomous, deploying co-pilots, like deploying these agents at the enterprises, replacing the jobs of few that are repetitive. For example, take a data entry. So they might hire someone called data entry agent instead of the real agent. It will be the agent of using LLM. So
Makes sense.
yeah,
The
there
web
might
scraper
be such
agent or
agents. Yeah,
whatever,
web scraper agent using Firecrawl or some sort of tool out there. People have to just build those agents, test them, and then they'll just deploy those agents. And
Then
so
Yeah.
that's what is gonna happen, I guess, because we can see definitely agent manager, AI engineer agent, and product manager agents, and the team of bunch of agents that work together to build a product for sure. That's already happening. Someone from Anthropic hackathon actually did this.
Oh, wow.
Build a team of data scientists, product managers, AI engineers, software engineers to come up with a plan and then execute the whole product.
That's pretty wild. That's cool. Yeah, last question is you told us some of the things that people should learn and stuff as they're thinking about getting into Gen AI and the balance between building versus kind of research. What do you think is the most underrated skill that a Gen AI ML engineer needs to have to be successful?
Say maybe all early graduates think like building projects would make more sense, but once they are in an organization, at least like first couple of years, they have to think about like business problem, why it's important, why are we doing this, ask right questions, talk to right people, gather right form of evidence even, and do a lot of planning even before you start executing, irrespective of any domain. I would say like
Impact.
impact. Focus on that high impact.
We had one big podcast about it, Nikhil, and we
Okay.
can talk about it I think, business impact. What are you working on? How does it change things? It's as simple as that. Knowing about that rather than just going after because it's a cool problem to go after.
Yeah, exactly. That's the whole point I wanted to cover, because we can keep doing a lot of things like as an engineers, but the only thing that I saw people miss is like understanding the business impact and then what is the most important thing to do for now, like what exactly is the important thing. So if they want to learn something, they should build projects that are in demand and also should focus on some basics like internal understanding how it works basically. So that's do some sort of planning, come up with a plan initially on what you want to execute and then start executing it.
And then how can AI help people unlock that skill more?
Yeah, and if you have access to Owen, define a problem statement in a way, think like a human, like first, and then think step by step, and then give it in the same instructions to Chat GPT O1, and then see how can it come up with a plan.
Right.
Also prompt it in a way like think carefully, think from all the dimensions, think from marketing, think from sales, things from product, think from other perspective, use all the perspectives and then come up with a plan, come up with a GTM for my startup, come up with a whole sales plan for my startup. It can do everything, right? Like the only thing it needs is ask right questions, just like our
I'm thinking
human.
create drama with AI. AI, you don't have money. You need to, your life's at stake. Your visa is going to expire. We have this idea. We need to make it work. Be the CEO of this company and come up with a great strategy.
You should ask what roast me, and then it's really gonna roast you. So
That's amazing. I actually should try to emotional blackmail and see what ChatGPT will reply.
yeah, it's nice. Like voice mode is also really cool. I like the voice mode.
Yeah.
And my mom uses that voice mode actually.
Oh, wow.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. That's probably an ML AI engineer's family gets onboarded to AI too. Nice. This was awesome. Sean, do you want to close it? Yes,
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
great. Well, thanks, Nikhil, for joining us on the show. It was really an informative discussion with you. So, yeah, thanks for joining.
Thanks, Sean. It was really nice talking to you both, actually.
Thank you, Nikhil. It was amazing. I really loved how we organically went and covered multiple areas around an area as well. I think hopefully I've learned a ton, and I hope our viewers will also learn a ton from this podcast.
Yeah. And to our listeners and our viewers, if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. If you have any questions for us or Nikhil, please drop them in the comments. And yeah, we'll also share that link to your upcoming talk, Nikhil, in the description. So give that a check. Thanks, everyone.